It is October 3rd, 2013 on a Thursday. It's 1:35 a.m. Pacific Time, and this is Early Morning Pink. Continued shutdown paralyzed politicians reveal just how close the U.S. goobs is to total collapse. This is by Mike Adams, the Health Ranger. He's the editor of naturalnews.com. This is dated October 3rd, 2013 on a Thursday. Anyone looking for evidence of the impending total failure of the U.S. government need look no further than the shenanigans taking place right now in Washington, D.C. To summarize, as the nation hurtles towards an inevitable debt collapse, the O administration insists the answer is to pile on more debt by raising the debt ceiling. Anyone who disagrees with this is being characterized as an anarchist. Unless the debt ceiling is raised, the U.S. Treasury will default on hundreds of billions of dollars in debt obligations in less than a month. Such a default would absolutely wreck the credit worthiness of the USA, causing the future debt burden to start wildly multiplying in a runaway mathematical blowout that can only end in financial collapse. Obamacare, a broken system of coerced, unconstitutional health insurance mandates, is already causing widespread economic disaster across the country as tens of millions of people are losing their jobs, having their hours cut, or seeing their company-sponsored health plans canceled. But the socialist philosophy of O-Care is so central to the political left that they are viciously defending it at all costs. If O-Care fails, the socialist fantasies of the left go down the drain with it, and they can't let that happen. No, not even if it means medically bankrupting millions of Americans thanks to the outrageously high costs of health insurance everyone is now forced to buy. As political leverage in all of this, the federal goobs is supposedly shut down, but the IRS is still collecting money. The TSA is still groping travelers at the airport, and billions of dollars in government waste is still accruing each week. To make the shutdown appear worse, the O administration erected tall barriers around World War II veterans' memorials, desperately attempting to dramatize the shutdown while blaming the Republicans. This also shows the utter disrespect for American veterans who fought for the very freedoms Mr. O seems to enjoy destroying at every opportunity. The mainstream media, ever the pathetic defenders of failed hope and change rhetoric, is still running interference for the O administration, pretending that all of this is the fault of Republicans and that somehow Democrats had no part in any of it. The very idea that Republicans might want to negotiate a mutual agreement rather than bowing down to the destructive wrath of O-Care is heavily and repeatedly criticized by the media. How dare you want to negotiate? Peasants don't negotiate with kings. Oh no, they bow down and kiss feet. You are watching the slow motion collapse of the U.S. How many of you feel that way, that you're watching the slow motion collapse of the U.S. government? What you are witnessing here is the utter failure of the U.S. federal goobs. Yes, I said goobs. A failure that may portend an even more sobering failure to come. This is a goob that has run out of money, run out of credibility, run out of ideas, run out of trust from the people, run out of excuses for its utter abandonment of law, justice, and the will of the people. Maybe it's time that we the people ran them all out of Washington. Yeah, it's certainly clear to the American people at this point that virtually no one in Washington represents their interests anymore. The exceptions being a very small number of stoic defenders of fundamental freedom, like Ron Paul and Ted Cruz. For their efforts to stand firm against the government steamrolling the entire economy into oblivion, they are being called anarchists by Senator Majority Leader Harry Reid, an all-out wretched apologist for endless cancerous growth of the institution of the goobs. What happens if 25 million federal paychecks suddenly stop? Has anybody wondered about that? As I'm watching all of this, I can't help but wonder just how much more the American people are going to take before they fill the streets in protest. Or even worse, what happens if the so-called desperate measures now being invoked by the Treasury can't hold out long enough and the entire system goes into financial default? What happens in just 1 week across America if all the people dependent on government, and I said government this time, doesn't receive their paychecks? Imagine 25 million full-time and part-time federal employees suddenly waking up and realizing there's no paycheck. There is no retirement. There is no free health care. And there is no faith and credit of the U.S. goobs. None. Whoa. I can tell you almost exactly what's going to happen when that day comes, but you probably wouldn't believe it anyway. So I'll save that explanation for when the time is right. But I will give you the hint, wink, wink, that you'd better brush up on reading www.survivalblog.com and buy everything ever written by James Wesley Rawls, because unless an unprecedented holy miracle occurs that defies the laws of economics, there is no saving the U.S. goobs from its own financial destruction. If the U.S. goobs were a hospital patient, you'd pull the plug out of sheer mercy. The only real question is, how long will it take for the people to finally lose sufficient faith in this failed government to actually pull the plug and shut it down permanently? If you think of the U.S. goobs as a hospital patient, it's being kept alive with an artificial lung, an IV feeding tube, a cocktail of toxic blood thinners in a bedside defibrillator. The crash cart is on standby, and the heart monitor is showing a failing pulse headed towards flatline. The Fed stands ready with a syringe full of adrenaline labeled quantitative easing. But the patient has already been injected 57 times, and no one knows how much more the patient's heart can handle before it explodes. At some point, it's all such a horrifying wreck that you just want to pull the plug and pray for the suffering to end. That's where I believe that America is ultimately headed to a collapse, a rebirth, and hopefully a new era of abundance without the onerous burden and interference of a government gone insane. And that's going to do it for this report. So, you are watching the slow motion collapse of the U.S. goobs. Ran out of money, credibility, ideas, trust from the people, and run out of excuses. That's going to do it for this report. Again, this is by Mike Adams, the Health Ranger. He's the editor of naturalnews.com, and he gets all the credit for the content of this report. Thank you for watching. Please stay safe. Pink out.